What's going on, guys? Wow, has there been a lot of trades in the offseason so far, especially with marquee name players. It's been wild, right? How many QBs have changed teams this offseason? So I definitely wanted to touch on the top trades of the offseason involving big name players for very important teams, right? So the first one we're going to look at is obviously the Russell Wilson trade. That was the first one to go this offseason, right? He got traded to the Broncos. Now, they got a lot in return for Russell Wilson, right? They got 2 firsts, 2 seconds, a 5th, and then 3 players. Tight end Noah Fant, QB Drew Lock, and then defensive tackle Shelby Harris. 2 starters, and probably potentially what's going to be their starting quarterback for next season. So that's a big return value on a 33-year-old quarterback. But that quarterback is a top 10 quarterback in the league. Some would say top 5, depending on who you talk to, right? So for the Broncos that are in that AFC West, which is probably after this offseason one of the toughest divisions in football, they had to make a move, right? Had to keep up with the Chiefs. The Chargers are making a lot of moves. The Raiders are making a lot of moves. The Broncos had to do something. They decided that something was going to be Russell Wilson. Now, for Russell Wilson, this trade makes sense, right? Because he didn't want to be in Seattle anymore. Had no desire to be there for whatever reason, and I'm not sure what that is, right? There's been a lot of different reports, depending on if you're talking to him, to his team, to the Seahawks. So I'm not sure what the issue was, right? But he wanted out, looked at his options because he, had that opportunity to kind of control his destiny, and he decided on the Broncos. And if you look at it, the Broncos have a very good team around him, right? They have a young running back who's doing really well. They've got 3 good receivers, a couple of good change of pace guys. They've got still a really good tight end in Albert I'm not even going to try to say that one. Alberto, we'll call him. Good young tight end, right? And then they have a really good offensive line, which is something that Russell Wilson lacked in Seattle and was, by most reports, a point of contention between him and the Seahawks, right? They could not get a good offensive line in front of him. This is one of the better offensive lines in the league. And then if you look at it, a very good defense as well, right? You got Patrick Surtain, Justin Simmons, Ronald Darby, Josie Jewell, Bradley Chubb. They stole Randy Gregory from the Cowboys at the last second. They've got some really good skill positions. Brandon McManus is a heck of a kicker. Kendall Hinton's a good returner. So they have a good team and needed a quarterback to be able to compete. And I think they got one, obviously, in Russell Wilson, who could very well make this team a Super Bowl contender. Now, on the flip side, if you look at the Seahawks, not quite rebuilding, right? Maybe a retooling. They're going to get a chance to see if Drew Lock's their quarterback. Drew Lock has shown flashes, right? He's had some good moments. He's had some bad moments. We'll see how it works out. I'm not sold on Drew Lock. But if he wants to succeed, there is the possibility here. There are some good offensive skill position players around him. Chris Carson, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf are all really good. Dwayne Eskridge was a high draft pick last year. So there's some opportunity there for him to put up some good stats. Now, the weakness on this offense is the offensive line, like we talked about. Gabe Jackson's probably the biggest name player they have, and they've struggled to keep, Russell Wilson upright and that running game going. So, with some of the picks they got back from the Broncos, which were important because they did not have a first-round draft pick, right? They now have one at number 9. They have multiple second-round picks, multiple third-round picks, and this is a deep draft for offensive linemen. So they have an opportunity to shore that position up. The defense is also still in pretty good shape, right? They got Shelby Harris, which is going to be big for them. They have Quentin Jefferson, Sidney Jones, Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams. It's a pretty good secondary if the pieces all come together and everyone can stay healthy. Their linebackers, they stole Uchenna Nwosu from the Chargers, which we talked about last video. And then Jordan Brooks is also another good linebacker, and they've got some younger options back in here. So they have an opportunity to do okay. They're still going to have to go up against the 49ers, right? So it's going to be a tough sell for them to do what they need to do. They need to answer this question at quarterback. Is Drew Lock the guy? I don't know. However, that any of the quarterbacks in this year's draft are going to put them over the top. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the video, right? Next big trade of the offseason, yet another quarterback changing teams, was Carson Wentz going to the Colts. So, I'm sorry, going from the Colts to the Redskins. Now, if you look at the Redskins, another team, especially in their division, which was not super impressive last year, that has pieces around the quarterback, and if they have the right quarterback, they can go far. Especially the NFC East, right? Antonio Gibson's a good underrated running back. Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, De'Ami Brown, good receivers. Logan Thomas is an older tight end, but still a very viable receiving option. And they have a pretty good offensive line, right? Picked up Andrew Norwell this offseason. Charles Leno is serviceable. Chase Roullier, Wes Scheitzer, good guard and center combo. Sam Cosmi's the newer guy, younger guy, but he's doing okay so far. So that offensive line is good. Now, this defense, right? If the defensive line is healthy, Chase Young, Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat, very, very good defensive line. Can get after anybody with rushing four, which we saw last year in the playoffs against the Bucs, right? That defensive line almost won them that game because Tom Brady was under pressure very often. Decent set of linebackers. Jamin Davis was a rookie last year. He's coming along William Jackson, Cameron Curl, Kendall Fuller. Decent secondary. So they have pieces. Tressway, one of the best punters in football. Fun to watch if you ever get a chance. They have a good team, right? And in the NFC East, where it's the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Giants, right? The Cowboys, you never really know what you're getting. On paper, they should be one of the better teams, but they've had a lot of turnover this offseason, right? They lost Amari Cooper, they lost Randy Gregory, La'el Collins is probably on the move. So they've got some questions to answer. Eagles, again, they have 3 first-round picks for a reason. That team is definitely in rebuilding. And the Giants, another one. You never really know what you're going to get with them, but that division has not been very impressive the last few years. So with a good quarterback, they have a chance to do very well in this division. And like I talked about last video, Carson Wentz has talent. That's not deniable. He's always posted good touchdown reception ratios. He always has good yardage. He got sacked a lot. Whether he held onto the ball too long trying to make things happen or what, I don't know. But he has talent if he can put it together and really get the buy-in of his teammates, which apparently has been a problem for him in, Philly and Indianapolis. If he can get the buy-in here in DC, this team could go. All right, the next big move we're going to talk about, Khalil Mack from the Bears to the Chargers. Actually, one more thing I want to touch on, right? Carson Wentz struggled last year in Indy. Everyone knows that. But if you look at it, Indianapolis, outside of Jonathan Taylor, who was a great running back and a good offensive line, he didn't have a lot to throw the ball to. Their best receiver is Michael Pittman, who is not setting the world on fire, right? Their other receiving room is a bunch of guys most people probably haven't heard of, right? Paris Campbell, Ashton Dulin, Kiki Kuti, used to be a Texan a few years ago. Michael Strachan, Desmond Patman. I don't know who most of those guys are. So you can't put all the blame on Carson Wentz, right? He might have tried to make too many things happen, and they didn't really have the receiving threats around him to help him. But they had a heck of a running game. So I don't know. I think they're better off without Carson Wentz, especially because they got the new Commanders to pay Carson Wentz's entire $20 million salary, which I didn't think they were going to get a team to do that. Now, if it works out for them, then they'll be happy to pay that $20 million. If it doesn't, Carson Wentz is probably on the move yet again coming up. Back to Khalil Mack, though. Khalil Mack to the Chargers for a 2nd and a 6th-round pick. Not a lot to pay for what could be still a very good pass rusher, especially in that system with Nick Bosa on the other side, right? So if you look at it, Khalil Mack has been an All-Pro 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in his career. He's been a Pro Bowler several times as well. He was the Defensive Player of the Year one year. Last year was one of his worst years, but he also only played 7 games. In those 7 games, 6 sacks. So he still can rush the passer effectively. And especially, when he's got a guy on the other side and Joey Bosa that can rush the passer, I think it's going to make both of them better, right? And that might be one of the best edge combos in the entire league. Now, for the Bears, it works out. Khalil Mack was not going to still be a viable option, probably, by the time this team was any good in a rebuild, right? They are definitely rebuilding. Took a quarterback high last year, and they're still working him in. See how that turns out. And they got rid of Allen Robinson. So they're definitely rebuilding. So they needed to shed some cap to try to, make some other moves, and they're heading in the right direction as far as that goes. Getting Khalil Mack out of there, but keeping, getting another second-round pick is a win for them. Next big one I'm going to talk about is the Browns getting Amari Cooper from the Cowboys. Now, we heard that he was going to get released if, they couldn't find a trade partner for him, and a lot of teams were probably going to wait and see what that looked like, right? Because Amari Cooper's owed a lot of money. And if they could get him, for next to nothing, or, a one-year prove-it deal to see if he still has it in the tank, then a lot of teams probably would do that, right? If you look at Amari Cooper's stats, a good wide receiver, right? Multiple 1,000-yard seasons. Never got double-digit touchdowns, but he gets the team in position to score a lot by, his yards. He's a good third-down receiver. He's a big-bodied receiver. Runs his routes well. So he can be a good receiver on a team. Now, the Cowboys decided they wanted to keep Michael Gallup instead of Amari Cooper. They re-signed Gallup to a big deal. Shipped Cooper out. Now, they got rid of Cooper for a fifth round pick and a swap of 6th-round picks. So they didn't get a lot for him, but they did say they were going to release him regardless. So a team was not going to overpay for Amari Cooper. So this really was a salary cap dump so they could try to sign other players like Michael Gallup. For the Browns, it was originally a weapon for Baker Mayfield. They really needed a true number one receiver. They did not have one. Their best receiver was Jarvis Landry, who can be a good receiver, but he is a slot receiver. He is somewhat limited, and he's a great route runner, but he's not going to burn you on the outside. He's not a big-bodied receiver. They needed a number one receiver, and Amari Cooper can do that. As evidenced by his multiple 1,000-yard seasons, lots of touchdowns, even last year where he had 8, only had 800 yards, but he can be a number one receiver when healthy, and he has, a good quarterback throwing him the ball. So this is big for the Browns, especially when you take into account that they just picked up Deshaun Watson, which we will talk about. But I'm just kind of going in order of when the things happened, right? So this could be a big move for a Browns team that needed to be able to move the football more effectively last year. That was a struggle for them. Their defense was good. Myles Garrett, J.O.K. They picked up Chase Winovich this offseason to help rush the passer even more. They've got a really good secondary. So this is a team that had a good defense. They needed the offense to keep up with it, and I think this could help. One of two reasons it could help put them over the edge, right? Next one we'll talk about, not really a big name player, right? But it's a big name team attached to Tom Brady. So you're always going to talk about it, right? Tom Brady came back to the Buccaneers, said, hey, I'm not going to retire. I'm going to come back and play for you. Now, Ali Marpet, one of his starting guards, has already retired at that point, and by all accounts is not coming back to football. Then they lost Ted Karras to the Bengals, and the Bengals very much needed Ted Karras, so that was a good pickup for the Bengals. But to replace one of them, they got Shaq Mason from the Patriots for a 5th-round pick. For nothing, essentially. And if you look at it, according to Pro Football Focus, Shaq Mason was the number 4 guard in football last year. 72 rated in pass blocking, 87 rated in run blocking. It's pretty good. For a 5th-round pick, you get the 4th best guard in football. I mean, you really can't ask for more for less. And he also has that familiarity with Tom Brady already because they played together in New England. So that's good for them. Not really sure why the Patriots didn't want Shaq Mason. I don't know if he was making too much money or was just an odd man out. I'm not sure what it was, but Bill Belichick does this every year, right? Gets rid of a good player for what seems to be nothing, and it seems to work out well for him. This one, I mean, I think Shaq Mason will do just fine with Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, but we'll see. Next big one, we're going back to the Colts, right? They picked up Yannick Ngakoue in a player swap, which you don't see very often, with the Raiders, right? The Raiders get cornerback Rock Ya-Sin, and the Colts get Yannick Ngakoue. Now, Yannick Ngakoue is an interesting player, right? He's been on 5 teams in 19 months. That's a lot of teams in a short amount of time, especially for somebody that seems to rush the passer pretty well, right? If you look at it, his pass rushing is really where he hangs his hat. He's a plus pass rusher in the league. And if you look at the stats, he's never had less than 8 sacks in a season, which is a very good record, right? A lot of places would pay top money for that, and apparently a lot of places have wanted that production, right? Started with the Jaguars, then he went to Minnesota, then he went to Baltimore in the same season, and then he went to the Raiders last season. Had 10 sacks last season. Raiders still traded him away. Left Max Crosby, got rid of him, and got Rock Ya-Sin. Rock Ya-Sin, a good young cornerback. Last year was the best year of his career, 28th cornerback in the league according to PFF. 32 teams, so he's a top cornerback in the league basically, and he's only been in the league 3 years, so he's getting better. And it definitely helps the Raiders not have to focus on cornerback as much in the draft. Now, another pick involving the Raiders that they made the next day was out of nowhere, trading for Davante Adams. Now, they gave away a first and a second round pick for Davante Adams, which I don't think they can be mad about, right? This is probably, depending on who you ask, second or third best receiver in the league. And really it could be 1 or 2, depending on if you like Cooper Kupp and his pure volume and route running, pure volume and sure-handedness, or Davante Adams, probably the best route runner in the league. Davante Adams has put up crazy stats basically since he got here, right? All of them have been with Aaron Rodgers. Starting in 2016, over 800 yards every year, double-digit touchdowns except for 2019. But he's been a Pro Bowler every year since 2017 and an AP All-Pro the last 2 years. Now, everyone thought he would re-sign a long-term extension with the Green Bay Packers. From what I've heard and read, he was fed up with the Green Bay Packers, much like Aaron Rodgers was last offseason. The Packers seem to do a really good job recently, actually, probably since Brett Favre left, of not valuing their players to what the players think they should be valued at. And it's hard to argue with the players when they've had some marquee names, right? Brett Favre still had it when he left. They upset Aaron Rodgers, almost lost him 2 off seasons in a row, and now probably the best receiver in the league doesn't want to play there anymore. Green Bay offered the same contract that the Raiders did with a little bit more money because of state income tax. They had to level it out, right? And Davante Adams said, no, I do not want to play here, and especially don't want to play it under the franchise tag. So, they're going to reunite Davante Adams with Derek Carr, who was his college quarterback at Fresno State. So that's a cool story, cool pairing. I think you'll see some great things from Davante Adams and Derek Carr, and the Raiders needed him, right? They needed, in that AFC West, like we've talked about, a true number 1 receiver to pair with Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow, who's a good wide receiver, but he's a number 2, number 3 wide receiver. They needed someone to put them over the top, so Josh Jacobs, Davante Adams, Darren Waller with Derek Carr makes that a very good offense in Las Vegas. So that'll be fun to watch, especially the connection between the 2 former college teammates. And then the last big one we're going to talk about, right? Deshaun Watson. So Deshaun Watson was acquitted by the grand jury of his legal troubles off the field, and instantly the trade market started with Deshaun Watson. Look at his stats here, actually. 4 years of playtime. Really good touchdown interception ratio, a lot of good yards. With subpar Houston Texan teams, that's what you got to remember, right? He's only 26, and he had his last season in the league, right? 4,800 yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. You'll take that every day of the week, especially for, like I said, a team that did not have a running game, didn't have a great offensive line, didn't have great receivers around him. He basically made that happen himself. So he's probably a top 5 quarterback in the league as far as pure talent goes. He's a really, really good quarterback. Now, according to all reports, the Browns were out of it, right? It was going to be between the two NFC South teams, the Falcons and the Saints. Panthers also were told they were out of it. Browns never stopped trying to get Deshaun Watson. They wanted Deshaun Watson. And to make that happen, right, they offered him a fully guaranteed 5-year, $230 million contract. Fully guaranteed, right? He gets all of that money. And the other thing they did for him, which is kind of interesting, even though he was acquitted by the grand jury, right, he still might be suspended by the league. We don't know yet. Haven't heard anything about it, but it's possible, right? Probably likely, based on what we know about the NFL and how they like to suspend people. Won't get into the Calvin Ridley being suspended a full season for betting $1,500 on NFL games, but we know they like to suspend players with other legal troubles, domestic abuse, child abuse, etc. For 4 to 6 games, 8 games, a full season for marijuana. That's a whole nother thing that we won't talk about. But they will probably suspend Deshaun Watson for conduct detrimental to the league. Now, how long that suspension is anybody's guess. But the interesting thing is the way this contract is structured, right? He has $1 million base salary for next year, for this season. And what that means is for each game he misses due to a suspension, he doesn't get $57,000. $57,500, right? Because that's 1/18 of his salary. That's all they can fine him per game. So by only giving him the base $1 million salary and a $45 million signing bonus, signing bonus, which is essentially his salary for the year, right? They really did him a solid as far as the contract goes and losing money based on what could be his suspension. My guess is that's probably what tipped the tides in their favor, right? Solid team around him. As far as the defense goes, the offense, again, they need some help at wide receiver, but they picked that up with Amari Cooper, and if he plays well, that team definitely has a chance to win the AFC North because the Steelers are rebuilding. Bengals look good, don't get me wrong. Ravens look good if they can come back and be healthy. That's always been their biggest thing. But that makes that another division that's going to be hard to win, but the Browns have the ability to do it based on, how far they went with Baker Mayfield. Deshaun Watson is a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield. So, a lot of interesting trades through this offseason, right? The other thing that helps the Texans do is move forward, right? The quarterbacks in this year's draft, I think that after the combine, the NFL looked at those prospects and weren't sold on any of them, right? Normally, you won't see these kind of moves for quarterbacks because everyone's always going to look for the next young one in the draft, right? That's coming up. There's always that can't-miss quarterback prospect. No one seems to be sold on the quarterbacks in this year's draft based on the fact that as soon as the combine happened, all of these quarterback moves started happening. And it was with teams that had high picks in the draft, right? The Seahawks, not the Seahawks. The Broncos were at number 9. The Texans have a high pick in the draft, and they're going to have multiple high picks in the draft. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett are still probably the top 2 in the draft, but they both have big questions. And I don't know that either one of them is going to be ready to start this year for a team. So I think that's why we saw all of the quarterback moves so far this offseason. And there's still more to probably come, right? Baker Mayfield's probably not going to stay in Cleveland. Where does he go? The Colts need a quarterback. The Seahawks now need a quarterback. There's multiple teams that could use quarterbacks. The Panthers, the Saints. So I don't think we're done seeing quarterbacks move this offseason. I think the next one to fall will be Baker Mayfield. The Falcons were willing to move on from Matt Ryan But again, I don't know who's going to take that salary on. So he probably stays put in Atlanta. But, you know, Marcus Mariota still needs to sign somewhere. Jameis Winston still needs to sign somewhere. There's quarterbacks still out there and quarterbacks on the trade market that make this an even more intriguing offseason going forward before the NFL draft. I think you will see teams doing their due diligence on the quarterbacks in the draft some more, because there's going to be an odd man out, right? Someone's not going to get a quarterback, and they're going to have to decide what they want to do when it comes to the draft. I still think Malik Willis, probably based on his potential upside, will be the first quarterback off the board, and I think potentially Kenny Pickett or Matt Corral will be the second quarterback off the board. Kenny Pickett's a little more polished now. Matt Corral is currently injured, but showed a lot last season where he's got some growing to do and has a lot of potential in the league. So we'll see how that plays out. But I just, like I said, guys, I wanted to talk about the trades this offseason because there's been a lot of marquee players moving, which you don't see super often when it comes to trades, right? You'll see them get released. You'll see them get franchise tagged, but generally you don't see them traded, and especially trades like this for multiple first-round picks, multiple second-round picks, player swaps. You just don't see it. So it's been a lot of fun to watch, and I don't think we're done, like I said. And there's still a lot of good free agents out there that can help teams, right? Teron Armstead's still out there. Tyrann Mathieu still out there. A lot of players, you know, signing prove-it deals that are getting a little bit older in the league. Fletcher Cox re-signed with the Eagles today. He was a big move. Saved them a lot of cap space. So I think you see a lot of teams still gearing up to try to make moves for players. The Saints cleared a lot of cap space to try to make something happen. They might go after Baker Mayfield to be able to pick up that contract. I think they got, in the last, I don't know, day, like $30 million they added to their salary cap just by restructuring contracts, releasing players, etc. So they want to do something because they don't want to fall behind in the NFC South any more than they have to, right? It's a fight for second place behind the Bucks right now, and Tom Brady's not going to play forever. So you don't want to fall too far behind because as soon as he leaves, that division's wide open. Thanks for joining me, guys. Like I said, leave some comments. Let me know what you think about the trades this offseason, you know, any other big ones that you think are still coming, anything else you want me to talk about in future videos. I'm always looking for ideas or feedback. You know, I like to interact with the comments, and if I get enough of them, I'll make a video just responding to comments and talking about what you guys want me to talk about, okay? Thanks for coming, and I'll catch you next time.